I think one of the big misconceptions with art therapy is we're going to sit there and interpret everything and tell you what you think and feel and what it means. It's really not like that. It's about you getting the chance to tell your story.
Hi, this is Mind Chat, a podcast about mental health by and for young people. I'm Lauren, your host, and in today's episode we will be talking about art therapy for mental health. Today we're joined by Sarah Versitano, Senior Art Therapist at Department of Psychological Medicine at the Children's Hospital at Westmead. Thank you for joining us today, Sarah. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here.
So to start off with, how would you explain art therapy to someone who is unfamiliar with it?
It's a really good question. So often people will come to art therapy thinking it might be similar to an art class, but actually it's quite a different experience. So instead of focusing on those technical components of getting it right or achieving a specific outcome, art therapy is more around that sort of freedom to express yourself, to share different thoughts, feelings, experiences through that process of art making, and then to sort of share that with the art therapist, or maybe if it's in a group, share that with the other group members as a way to kind of develop a deeper understanding of what's going on for you. It's a really unique sort of modality, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, that sounds great. So what's unique about using art as a therapeutic tool compared to other forms of therapy?
I guess it's particularly helpful when people have done maybe a lot of talk therapy in the past, like talk to a lot of counsellors or psychotherapists or psychologists, and they've used a lot of words to sort of describe their experiences. Art therapy is really unique in that you can share about those experiences through image and through symbol. And actually the talking component can be relatively short. You don't have to talk about what's going on. You can kind of process it in the image. And even that experience of like using different materials, whether it's paint or clay, the different sorts of materials might bring up different emotions or different thoughts or ideas, or even help you problem solve in a way you might not have otherwise if you were just sort of talking through it.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I guess you could say that art shares or conveys stuff that words don't always.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly when people, might even not be able to speak for different reasons, whether it's like the severity of a mental health condition or a physical condition, there's just still an avenue for you to be able to express what's going on for you without necessarily having to be verbalizing everything.
There's a lot of different people within the hospital who offer a range of art activities. How are they different from art therapy?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to consider. I think often art therapy and arts and health activities are seen to be the same thing, but actually they're quite different. So an art therapist is a trained counsellor or psychotherapist who uses art as a means to allow you to express yourself. So I suppose that's the kind of difference. Like, yes, art therapy can be relaxing and enjoyable as well, but the therapist is really there to support that process, to if things come up that maybe you didn't anticipate, if difficulty arises, if big emotions start coming out, the art therapist can really support you to move through that and navigate that and kind of problem solve through that as well.
Does someone need to have artistic skills to benefit from art therapy?
Definitely not. I think creativity is something we all have within us that we can all access. So it really benefits everyone at times to be able to express ourselves creatively. There's huge benefits from engaging in creative ways of expressing ourselves. So definitely don't have to, have those special technical skills or abilities to engage. In fact, sometimes it's almost easier to sort of let go and be really expressive when you're not too worried about what it's going to look like or making it perfect.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like art is a really useful tool to express different thoughts and feelings. So how does art therapy support patients with mental health challenges, especially children and teens?
I think just having that alternate way of communicating without necessarily having to tell and retell a particularly challenging story or experience is a nice way to sort of, I think it gives people the opportunity to share their story in a way that they're comfortable with, like to whatever extent they want and whatever parts they want to show, they kind of get a decision around that. And even though, we'll talk about the artwork at the end, it's still very much led by what it is the young person wants to share, like how much are they comfortable sharing. I think one of the big misconceptions with art therapy is we're going to sit there and interpret everything and tell you what you think and feel and what it means. It's really not like that. It's really just about you getting the chance to tell your story.
Could you share an example without breaching confidentiality of how art therapy positively impacted a patient?
Yeah, I remember a session when I was working with a young person who was situationally mute, and there was someone who very rarely spoke but could speak, had the capacity to, but due to the sort of severity of the mental health challenges they were experiencing at that time, found it very difficult to speak to therapists. So that actually really struggled with their psychologist, weren't able to speak to them at all. And when we sort of sat together in a session, they would make a series of artworks, and I would always just say, it's okay if you need to, sit and make art in silence. But the way we were able to use the art to communicate was then just that invitation to put those artworks into a series, like to create a story from those artworks. So then they were able to kind of place them one after the other. And I guess just that process, that invitation of working in silence for quite a long time, working at their pace, and then placing it in the story in the order that was important to them, then led to them being able to speak more openly about what that meant to them and how they were feeling really trapped and overwhelmed and feeling like they were lashing out because they felt cornered, and just all these things they hadn't had a chance to express before. So I thought that was a really powerful one that stuck in my head.
Yeah, that's really lovely to hear. It sounds like that art therapy really does have such a significant benefit to a lot of people. What role does art therapy play in a hospital environment?
Art therapy sometimes can be seen as something that happens as an extra in addition to the normal course of treatment, but actually it can be a really central component to help people express themselves. Like I said, especially in cases where talk therapies aren't as useful for, a variety of different reasons. So absolutely, there's a big presence of art therapy in mental health services, but also it can be on different units as well, like youth and transition, chronic illness. It can be for young people who are here on oncology wards or burns units or eating disorders units. There's lots of different spaces where art therapy can be useful in terms of people being able to share about and express the challenges relating to what they're going through, whether that's specifically around mental health or around just navigating the challenge of their own physical health conditions.
I imagine that each of your patients are very different from one another and are in very different situations. So how do you adapt sessions for patients with different needs, ages or conditions?
Yeah, so art therapy is really unique in that it's a very flexible and adaptive to whoever, is accessing it. So we have these two sort of major approaches. One is called directive and one is called non-directive. And I think a lot of art therapists, myself included, work very non-directively. And what that means basically is we're really led by the person. Like the person is the expert of their experience. We don't have our own agenda really about what it is you need to share. However, sometimes people can feel really anxious or really stuck. And then there's that kind of directive approach where we'll go, okay, let's bring out this art material or let's maybe think about this theme. Usually when we bring out themes or materials, it's to support someone to get started. Sometimes themes can also come up from a conversation. Like we might just start by chatting and, grabbing your favorite color or grabbing your favorite material. And then in the conversation, I'll notice a particular theme or idea come up or something someone's stuck with. And I'll kind of just give that invitation. Maybe we can, try and work through that in the artwork. And that will be a way to sort of guide someone. But it's very much meeting people where they're at. Adapting materials, especially if people have a particular physical limitation, to make sure that they can still access, this creative form of expression. And similarly, just being really patient with people that may not be able to find the words around their experience and just sort of letting things come in their own time. I think art therapy is a really patient sort of form of therapy in that it can be really gentle and not rushed.
Thank you very much for those insights, Sarah. That is amazing perspective. We also have joining us today Hiro Kojo, former patient and an assistant in nursing. Thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Hiro, can you share a bit about your experience with art therapy during your stay at the hospital?
Yeah, so I was first introduced to art therapy when I was a patient here at Westmead. when I was about 15 years old. And growing up, I've always done a lot of art at home and then at school. So when I heard about art therapy, it was definitely something I was interested in. But I didn't really know what to expect. I remember thinking, am I going to be taught how to draw, how to paint, or is it going to be more of a free space to do whatever I want? And when I was younger, I was quite a bit of a perfectionist. So I was always a bit scared starting a new artwork because I thought it had to look the way that I had envisioned it in my mind and that it had to look perfect. So I was a bit nervous starting art therapy, and because we only had that hour of group time, and I had thought, oh, that means I have to finish what I was working on. It had to look perfect. And then engaging in art therapy and doing more of it, it helped me challenge those ideas of it has to look a certain way. And creating art is about the journey of exploring your emotions and your surroundings and whatever's happening in your life, to create something that's meaningful to you.
What aspects of it made the biggest difference for you?
What I really enjoyed and what I found helpful were these check-ins that we would have at the start of the session, where we could choose an item from a box or a word or a picture from a bunch of cards. And if you wanted, you could use that as the sort of starting point for your art. And I found this process to be really helpful because I remember sometimes feeling very mentally and physically drained, and I would find it very hard to get anything on the page, really. What the check-in did was it helped me have a starting point where I could organise my thoughts and my emotions and translate that into the art that I created.
Was there a particular moment or piece of art you created that was especially meaningful?
I think the ones that stick out to me the most are these collages I used to make. I would look through magazines like Frankie and National Geographic, and it was really meaningful to me because I could pick out pictures and words and phrases and organise them on a page that might not have made sense to someone else looking at my art, but it made sense to me, and I was able to convey what I was feeling and what I was going through in a sort of abstract and more playful way.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How did art therapy help you express yourself or manage your emotions?
Art therapy helped me to express my emotions in a way that I couldn't really do with talking therapy. There were times I didn't know what to say to my psychologist about how I was feeling or what I was going through. So what art therapy gave me was a safe place to let out my emotions, like the fear that I was feeling, the sadness, the just being overwhelmed with whatever that was happening in my life. I could translate that onto a page through art therapy.
That sounds like it's been really helpful. Can I ask, how often would you receive art therapy when you were in hospital?
So when I was a patient here, there were usually about 2 art therapy sessions that we did as a group. And then I also did individual art therapy, and that was probably once a week for about an hour.
Do you still use art in your life as a way to cope and express yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So if I'm feeling quite intense emotions, I like to just get out a piece of paper, scribble, do anything really, just to express that emotion that I'm feeling, because I've learnt it's better to let it out, even if it's just on a page, to let it out instead of keeping it bottled inside you. So I've used that idea of representing my mental health journey as inspiration to create some large commission pieces for various mental health services like Safe Haven and Nimai Mental Health.
That's wonderful. For our young listeners today, what would you say to them considering trying art therapy for the first time?
I say to go for it. Use art therapy as a tool to express yourself, and explore tricky emotions that might be really hard to sit with and might be very hard to verbalize as well. Art therapy, it's a place where you can feel safe. It's a place where there's no judgment. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing. You can see where your emotions and your experiences take you in the art making process.
A big thank you to you both, Sarah and Hiro, for joining us on the podcast today. Your insight and Hiro, your experience with art therapy means a lot, and I know it will help our young listeners out there. A big thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you, Ron.
If this topic has raised anything for you, there's help out there. Talk to your family, friends, school, and tell your GP if you're feeling stressed, anxious, or down. You can call the Mental Health Access Line on 1800 011 511 or go to the Head to Health website, headtohealth.gov.au, for services and resources. Thanks for joining us on our final show of the Mind Chat podcast, brought to you by the Sydney Children's Hospitals Network.